Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Alton Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and Firsts in Fiction.
And I'm Alton Gansky, the author of numerous novels and nonfiction books.
And with us tonight, a very special guest. Here,
Live
and direct, coming to you from Hesperia, California, for now, Molly Jo Reilly. The crowd goes wild.
Wow.
So Molly, our listeners have no idea who you are, so why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am the has-been absent producer of the podcast. I texted Aaron about 3 o'clock this afternoon and said, hey, I want to show up tonight. So don't get used to it. I'm still kind of on hiatus because there's some great things happening in my life right now. And you'll know more about that in a while. Primarily, I'm packing up my house to move. As soon as my house sells, I am going to the writers community, living with people out in South Carolina. So I'm moving cross country. And that's why I've been off the podcast for a while. When I am on the podcast, I like to say that Aaron is like family, but thank God he's not really, because you just saw what happens. So
that's exactly what makes me like family, is the fact that I give you a hard time.
That is true. That is true. I am the curator of the Unemployment Cookbook. I write a blog, and I am producing the podcast so I can give these guys a hard time. And I am finishing the final draft of my novel, Nola.
Which is awesome. So we are super excited to have you back. Thank you for joining us.
I heard the sigh of relief through the text message when you said, yes, please.
Yeah. So a quick reminder, because Molly is here and so she'll hurt me if I don't. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up icon and subscribe to our channel. That way you get notified whenever we drop a new one, which is every other Tuesday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you're interested in listening live, that's when we do it. You can find us on YouTube or at aarongansky.com. And then click on the FIF Live button, and that's where we hang out, and you can talk there, and Molly will say hello, and all these wonderful things will happen. Did I miss anything?
Well, first of all, I'm not ever going to actually hurt you. I'm just going to change all your passwords. So okay. I just, I could never actually hurt you because your wife would then in turn hurt me. So
that is true.
But changing the passwords just might be fun.
Right. If you've been trying to reach me on social media and you haven't, it's because she doesn't work for me anymore. So
okay.
I'm still trying to sink back into social media.
Apparently, Aaron doesn't understand the word hiatus. It means a temporary stoppage. Temporary.
Okay. Now we're gonna have to iron out some details then. Well, I'll send you a new contract.
Did you fire me?
No. This is getting awkward. It's like everybody.
I need a new plate.
It's called downsizing.
Oh, that's it. I need a new plate, Aaron.
Sorry, I teach in a business school, so now I got all the lingo. So
there you go. Hey, the chat room missed me. Look, Dave has missed me. Brenda's missed me. Tess is there. Andy, Caleb. Hey, Caleb. So at least they're being nice.
Indeed. So someone has to, and they drew the short straw. So, all right. See,
hey,
Molly,
room.
Maybe this is why she took a hiatus.
I'm not in the chat room too much anymore lately. So any of you guys want to come to my rescue and, just leave a snarky comment in the chat room, maybe we'll publish them throughout the week on the Facebook page.
All right. Somebody's drunk with power. She's drunk with power. I'm drunk with Gatorade. Let's move on to our first topic tonight. I'll put my Gatorade down here. I'm sorry. I just got off football practice, so hot, sweaty, and need some Gatorade. Tonight, we are shifting gears. We've kind of wrapped up our Gross Anatomy of a Novel series. Thanks to those of you who joined us for that. We do hope it was helpful to you. And Pops and I did some talking about how we wanted to proceed, what kind of topics we wanted to cover. And I think, Pops, we basically agreed that we've done a lot of the craft style topics for a very long time. So it's been a while since we've kind of revisited just the life of the writer and what it is to be a novelist and a fiction writer. And so we're going to kind of revisit that with a few 10 things episodes. So tonight we'll kick that off with 10 things I wish I could tell myself when I first started writing. There's actually a lot more than 10, but we had to cap it somewhere. 10's a nice round number. If we go to 11 or 12, you'll forgive us, I'm sure. But here are 10. So the first thing I would tell myself as I was beginning my writing career is...
Don't listen to Aaron.
Don't listen. Yeah, that's exactly it. Is you're going to make it. Don't give up. So it's really easy as a beginning writer to become discouraged. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. I think sometimes we actually cling to the idea that we're not going to make it because it gives us the freedom or the license to not write. And sometimes writing is hard. And so when it gets hard, it's very easy for us to say, well, we're not that good. We're never going to get published anyways. I'm just going to stop. I did stop actually for quite some time, pursuing several different careers. And I was always writing when I was doing these other careers, but maybe not as routinely and as regularly as I should be. And I think it's because I just didn't take myself seriously as a writer. I didn't think I would ever be published. It was a dream that was too far off. It was too hard. The chances of me ever getting a book contract were slim to none. And so it felt like kind of a worthless type of a pursuit. But I found myself still doing it because I loved it. I wish I had been, if I could go back to when I was younger, I wish I could just tell myself, don't give up. Don't put it aside. Don't sell yourself short. Instead, have that confidence that you're going to need to pursue it. To discipline yourself, to continue working even when you don't feel like working, because that's the only way that you ever will get published is through hard work and not just by happenstance or luck. So that's the first thing that I would tell myself.
So how long had you quit?
Well, I mean, I wrote regularly in high school here and there. I got to college and told myself that I'd never be a writer. It wasn't practical. So I, spent 2-3 years going to school, taking English classes, but never really taking anything related to creative writing. And then I decided, well, I'll take a creative writing class because I enjoy it. And I did. And then I decided, well, I guess I'll just major in English and take a lot of creative writing classes. And I did. But even then, as I was taking those creative writing classes, I was getting better, but it still didn't seem like it was anything that was going to happen. It was recreational. It wasn't occupational. And so I probably wasted a handful of years. If you think if I had started very diligently while I was in high school or even out of high school, Tessa Emily Hall, who we just had on last podcast, published her first novel, I think, when she was in high school, because she took herself seriously and she didn't give up. And so if I had had that kind of determination, perhaps I could have had a similar kind of a career arc where I could have started earlier and had more books to my name currently. But it took me until about 2006 or so when I registered at Antioch University to get my MFA. It took me about until 2006 before I said, okay, I'm really going to commit to this and do it.
I want to play devil's advocate here before we go on to the next one, which is, you made a comment. Do you really think that because you started later in the game taking yourself seriously that it was a waste of time? Or do you think that maybe that was just a way to get some of the background noise out of the way? So when you did start actively believing in yourself, you didn't have those doubts creeping in. You just knew you could go forward full speed.
No, I think they were wasted years. In context of my career as a writer, they're years I can never get back. I dabbled in it, but it was nothing more than a hobby. And writing as a hobby is great. And if you want to write as a hobby and writing is your hobby, that's great. But if you want to do it as a career, if you want to do it as an occupation, if you want to do it seriously, and when I say seriously, I mean writing for publication. There's a difference between writing for yourself and writing for publication. I did a lot of writing for myself in those years. That wasn't wasted. But I will willfully admit that writing that I did for myself was no good. It just wasn't. And even if it was not nearly as good as it could have been. And so it's it's taking high school courses when you're in college. It's taking elementary school classes when you're in high school. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I wasn't putting in the amount of work and determination that was required to become truly skillful at it, to take that step from amateur hobbyist to someone who takes themselves seriously with a lot of confidence and wants to educate himself or herself and become better and do it professionally. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Did you notice a change in your attitude, or maybe let me back up, in your motivation?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably end up talking about this again later, but there's always the idea that I want to write today, but there is this new video game. I should finish that story, but there's a movie coming out that I want to see. Oh, my friend called me up. They want to hang out. Those are the opportunities that I would willfully pick up and run with. Oh, I'm going to play this new video game. I'm going to go see this movie. I'm going to do those types of things. Rather than saying, you know what, I've got something I need to finish, or I'd love to see a movie, but let's not catch the 5 p.m. Let's catch the 7 p.m. so I can, hit my words for the day or whatever the case is. I think, and I'll say it this way, I think I can say it delicately and kindly enough. But if you don't take yourself seriously as a writer, nobody else will. If writing is just a hobby to you, then you're a hobbyist. You are not a professional. So I wish I could have told myself to take myself more seriously and think of myself as a serious writer before waiting until my master's program to really start that.
We'll touch on this a little bit later, I think, in one of mine, but I think what I'm getting at is sometimes people, when they start writing, is what they really want to do is they want to be noticed. Okay. They want to be loved. They want people to say, oh, that's wonderful. And they're very quick to show what they write. Remember, you and I had conversations about this when you were in high school. Right. That the goal was to write something very quickly so somebody could read it, as opposed to producing art. Yeah. And sometimes you don't get to the point till you get some years under your belt where there's a difference, where there's a big difference in writing for yourself and writing for others. And I think the big leap for many, and I'm sure we'll touch on this a dozen different ways tonight and in the weeks ahead, is the love of the craft. Right. It isn't so much that I want somebody to say, hi, I want you to meet my friend, the author. It's, would you get to the end and you say, okay, I've written a good story. It may not be the world's best story, but it was a good story. For what this story was meant to be, this is it. And I finished it, and I did that. And there's a love for it. I always liken it to singers, and I'll use this illustration again. There are singers who sing, you see them on American Idol and America's Got Talent and stuff, and you can tell their real goal isn't music. The real goal is fame. Mm-hmm. That's what they want. So they're willing to sell out or even appear foolish, as some of them do, because they can't sing, and they haven't recognized that, or they haven't trained for it. And so sometimes I think what happens, especially if you're a young person starting to write, is your motivation changes. It's no longer, I want to be seen, I want to be read, I want to be loved. It's more that, I want to write this story because it has some kind of value, some kind of meaning, some form of entertainment. I mean, it doesn't have to be overly literary or serious. It could be fun. Callahan's Bar, we've talked about that before. There's nothing serious in that. I mean, there's some serious moments in it, but for the most part, it's a comedy. But it's very entertaining and at times thought-provoking. And so I've always appreciated Spider Robinson for writing those. So that's really what I was getting at. Was there something, because I, like you, had given up?
I just got, I'm going to answer that, but first I'm going to take a lap around my room so my lights come back on.
Okay.
So I will be right back.
We'll time you.
So nice to be back.
The things we do to save money, I guess.
Sure, that's what that is.
He's a fan that moves or something like that will pick that up.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's funny.
Apparently he fell down while doing a lap in the room.
I guess so.
Yeah. Oh, he's back. Okay.
Yeah, no, I got too busy listening to you, Pops, and didn't take my normal lap around the room. I gotta take laps around the room to keep my motion detecting lights on in my classroom here. So
get a little ball you should
can't
throw or
just
something.
wave your hands and say, yo.
no, it needs to be. I don't know what it is. I think I'm too far. My desk is too far from the light sensor, so I gotta get closer. Anyhow, now that I'm back.
Yeah,
We missed you.
It's a big classroom. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Pops. By the way, I appreciate you bringing back all those painful memories. But you're spot on. We did have those conversations, and I wish I had listened to you, when I was younger as well, about that very subtle difference between thinking of myself as the target audience and thinking of someone else as the target audience, producing something that not for the sake of the accolades or the look what I can do, but just producing the best work of art that you can. Taking more time with something, being a little more careful with it, challenging myself. Okay, this is good, but can it be better? And learning the difference between producing something quickly that's not of great quality and taking your time to produce something that is of greater quality and I dare I say better worth.
And by taking your time, you mean 6.5 years?
That may be a little too long.
Shh, don't burst my bubble.
Might not be long enough. I don't mean that as an insult, but some have taken, a decade or more to write a book.
Didn't it take Herman Wouk 20 years to write The Winds of War?
I don't know. He doesn't talk to me anymore. So.
Okay, then.
I shot him in Facebook, and he didn't get back to me. So
yeah, he unfriended me. So
yeah,
I don't even know if he's still alive.
You guys need so much help.
You know who knows the answer to that question?
That would be Tess.
That would be Tess. Help us out, Tess. Fact checker Tess over there. Good to see you again.
Yeah, that's not unusual. Or think of how long The Hobbit Tolkien took to write, and he had to be prompted by C.S. Lewis to send it in. So that's really not unusual. Some people have trouble letting go, or afraid it's not perfect. At some point, you have to put it out into the wild to see what happens.
Stop talking about me. Talk to me.
And push it out of the nest at times. So, yeah. And I did the same thing, Aaron. I quit for a while, because I didn't know what I was doing. And so my first book, I sent it to a pay-to-read agent. Don't ever do that. But I didn't know. I was dumb as a brick, and a really dumb brick. And so got a few negative comments. They weren't horrible comments, but I just really didn't know where to go from there. So I put it away for 5 years. I didn't write for 5 years.
Wow.
Let it sit on my shelf for 5 stinking years. And then I've told the story about how I got a call from Jack Kavanaugh, who applied his size 12 to my fanny. And Kavanaugh, the novelist, and he got me back on track. I think that's why I wrote so many books, because I was making up for a 5-year loss. I was compensating.
Or overcompensating?
Well, I don't know what needs a modify. Yeah, I was. That's what I was.
All right.
Yeah.
So then what would you tell yourself, Pops, if you could jump in that time machine?
First of all, I'd start off by saying, man, you're looking good. And no, I think what I would say is, one of the first things I'd say is, remember, every published book is a how-to book for you to learn from. And that took me a while. I loved reading. But it finally occurred to me one day that the best writing education I could ever get was to take a book that somebody had labored over and has been through editing and all of those things, and find out what they did. How did that come to be? And pick up all the good things, steal what I could. If there was something I didn't like, I no longer allowed myself to simply say, I don't like that. I had to be able to explain to myself why I didn't like it, why I would avoid it in my own writing. And so I began to analyze, deconstruct, and I would do that before every book. When I get serious, I would sit down and look at, I don't know, a dozen, maybe 20 different books to look at their structure and how they did the chapters and how long were the chapters and was it first person or third person and, what was the genre? And I would go over them until mine began to set up in my mind. Then I felt like I could start writing. So I think I would remind myself that really getting a good education like you did with the MFA is a great way to go. It is not the only way to go because you have textbooks all over your house probably. They don't call them textbooks. For this show, we're talking about fiction, so let's call them what they are: novels and novellas. They're all over the place, and those are some of the best things to learn from. Even the bad ones, you can learn what not to do, and that's fair warning. And I was going over a book, and I kept saying, "This portion is bad. I should never do that." When I realized I was doing that in the work I was putting together, my work in progress, I said, "Well, wait a minute, I'm doing that." So I went back and changed it. So it was one of the best educations, and all it cost me was the price of the original purchase. And if you go to the library, you don't even have to pay that.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I learned that process. I mean, they try to teach it to me in high school, but I was in high school, so it was lost on me. In college, I took a much deeper look at that, and that's when it started clicking. That's when English started clicking for me. It was more in college, my bachelor's degree, and then when I eventually went to get my master's, that process, I became even more. I'll say better at it, but more deliberate, if that makes sense. As you said, you would look at things like point of view, structure, chapter length. You'd look at the different figurative language that they're using, how they turn this particular phrase, their style, how much detail are they using, when do they make the pacing faster, when do they slow the pacing down, those types of things. But I came to realize that I could do it in short stories. Doing it over the course of a novel, two completely different things. And so a lot of my master's stuff was short fiction. And I've tried to take some of those things that I've learned from short fiction into the longer form, into the novel form, to still try and bring some of that immediacy to it, try and bring some of the unique aspects and play around a little bit with things like point of view, to try and create a product that's not like the typical novel that you see. I think that type of study that you're talking about is very valuable. I got my master's, but you don't have to. As you said, that's not the way for everybody. It's expensive. I'll be paying on that probably until my kids are dead. It's going to be a long time. They're probably going to be taking money. They'll just take my casket probably. I don't know. But not everybody wants to go into debt for something like that. But as you say, Pops, there's a great college right down the street at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, right down the .com highway. And I would say do it deliberately. In this book, I'm going to look at these particular elements. I know I'm reading Slaughterhouse-Five because of the way that Vonnegut breaks the fourth wall. And I'm going to look at how he does that and see why he was successful at it, whereas so many other people aren't. I'm going to read some Flannery O'Connor now. I'm going to read Wise Blood and figure out what the ending means, even though nobody in America understands that book. I love that book, but I still don't understand it. Whatever it is, I'm going to look at how she alternates between point of view and does the pacing when she's switching back and forth between perspectives. So that deliberate study becomes very, very valuable. If you're interested in getting an education, one of the things that going and getting a master's degree does, and this is not the only way to do it, but it provides a variety of perspectives on your work from other writers. Granted, many of those perspectives are from people who are in the same boat as you. They're wanting to become writers as well. They may not actually be writers at that point, but it does put you in contact with professors, published authors who have been around the block. They know what they're doing, and they can give you some real keen insight. In terms of networking, that's pretty valuable because you have a published novelist reading your work. Now, some of you belong to writers groups where you can have something like that occur as well. The quality, you have to look at the quality. Is it going to be the same quality as an MFA? But regardless of whether or not you have the money or the time to go and do a formal education, you can educate yourself and learn quite a bit that way as well. So
I get my education by hanging out with Aaron. You paid for the MFA, and all I have to do is show up and cook chili once every couple of months.
There you go. And you can also bribe. You can bribe novelists. They can be bribed. So
this is true. This is true.
Starving artist, starving novelist.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
There's one last thing. The price you'll pay for that is it does take away some of the joy of reading. That doesn't mean you'll never enjoy a book, but it's hard for me to read because I analyze, and the better the book, the more I analyze.
I've heard you say that, and for some people, I believe that's true. For me, I enjoy the analysis part. Maybe I'm weird, but it's going to Disneyland and enjoying Small World, but still knowing where all the emergency exits are. Does that make sense? Now, some people will go to Disneyland, they'll go on the Small World, and if they've worked at Disneyland, they're like, here's all the emergency exits, and I know how they do that, and I know how they do that. So it may not be as enjoyable for them. But when an artist goes, a theme park designer goes on Small World, they know how everything is accomplished, but they go, they accomplished it with style. I see it. It's a magician watching another magician. I know how he did that trick, but he made it look good, right? So for me, I enjoy that aspect. Sometimes I was required to read books that I hated, but I do like having the ability to say, you know what, I'm not going to finish this book because it's just not that good. But yeah, we'll move on. I won't mention what books I stopped reading.
Oh no, now you have to.
Well, I don't want to offend Pops, so.
Oh, I'm used to it.
Wow. I was going to say I like the director's cuts on DVDs. People think streaming movies is great, but I really like the actual disc because you get the behind the scenes and the how you do it and the cutouts and the edits and all of that. And writing is kind of the same thing like that. That's a good form of education, is watching a movie and how. For me, it is how would I write this movie differently, and then watching behind the scenes, listening to the commentaries and stuff.
I like the idea of doing a novel with a behind the scenes chapter. Here's how I approach this particular scene, and that'd be kind of fun.
I wrote this scene when I had the flu.
A little pretentious, perhaps.
I'm just keeping all the 6.5 years of notes while I'm working on NOLA. Aaron told me to change this. I told him no. Aaron told me to change this. I told him no. I changed this. Aaron hated it.
Well, at least you're working on it, right?
Carry on, Aaron, here. What's your next one?
A little bit.
I would also tell myself not to be afraid to invest in myself. I didn't have a problem spending money on a new laptop because I used it for work. I also used it to write on. But I was very reluctant to spend money on writers' conferences, and I was reluctant to go and get my master's degree. One of the reasons, this is, I think, relevant. One of the reasons I chose to get my master's degree, as many people know, is because with a master's degree as a teacher, you get paid more. And so partially it was an investment because I knew once I got my master's degree, I would be making more money. My paycheck would increase. And so that's one reason that encouraged me to do that. Not all of you are in that position. Some of you having a master's degree doesn't mean anything for your place of employment. So it may not make sense for you and your family, but it did for me and mine. And I learned quite a bit. That was an investment. And you guys have already heard me say great things about the program. It's a great investment in my future. A lot of the friendships that I've made have lasted a decade now and still going strong. I made professional connections. My writing got much better. And my writing career really took off, Pops, when you got tired of me saying, no, I can't afford to go to a writer's conference, and saying you're going to a writer's conference, and you did some finagling and found a way to get me there. And that there was a connection that I made there. Many of you have heard the story. I made a connection there with the guy who eventually became my publisher. He published my first couple of books, and a friend to this day. And so that was really valuable. But I was so reluctant to do that because I didn't know if the payout was going to be there. I didn't know if it was going to be worthwhile. This is a personality trait. I don't like spending money on myself, even though I do it quite often. I don't like spending a lot of money on myself because it takes away from my family. And so I felt like I'd be doing my family a disservice and all these types of things. Of course, here is my family encouraging me, that they're telling me to go, and I'm still like, I don't know, dragging my feet. I would go back in that time machine and look myself in the eye and say, you are a good looking man. And then I would say, go ahead and invest in yourself. Save some money here and there, make it work, but go ahead and invest in yourself. And I would have done it sooner. I would have done it much sooner too. So instead of dragging my feet. So thanks, Pops, for convincing me for dragging me to that writers conference. Got to take a lap. I'll be right back.
And thanks to Aaron for dragging me to that writers conference, to which I dragged Becky Lindsay to that writers conference.
Yeah, it's contagious, just like the flu.
It is. Like the good flu, though.
Yeah, it's a good flu.
It's a good flu.
I'm back.
It's a big office you have, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing with a conference like that is it's not just what you learn in the classroom. It's seeing other writers.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning that there are other weird people like you. They understand. Many of them are sympathetic. And you get to see the culture. And that's one of the beautiful things. They used to do this with writers' colonies. And people, you'd go and live there for a while in a writers' colony. And so you're around people doing the same kind of thing, not necessarily the same work, but the same kind of thing. And artist colonies used to do that too. So conferences are great for that, just for the emotion, not just the brain. It's good for your heart, not just your mind. So, well, if I were to go back again, I would say this to myself. I would say, and I know you've all heard this before, but there's a reason for me to repeat it. I would tell myself, listen, chump, no one ever hit a home run from the dugout. Get up and take your at-bats. That had been one of the most startling things for me to realize, because I do like baseball, but one day it hit me that you cannot be a success at baseball unless you get out of the dugout. And it's the same thing with writing. And after I'd been teaching writing for a long time, there were always a large percentage of people. I see different numbers, but it's a large percentage of people who will do all the work and they'll pay to be at conferences and they'll study other books, but they just won't get out of the dugout because they're afraid it might be rejected. So let me give this little bon mot. If you're going to be a writer, you're going to get rejected. Chris Carter from the X-Files rejected Stephen King's work several times and then rewrote it. But Stephen King was a professional and he took it on the chin and was happy to have had the episode made with that. And the reason Chris Carter didn't like it was it wasn't scary enough. I don't know who says that to Stephen King, but apparently Chris Carter could get away with it.
Wow.
So everyone gets some form of rejection one way or the other. Even if the book is published, you're going to have people who don't like it.
Right.
It just happens. And what you need there is a very skillful application of apathy. The ability to say, I don't care if you don't like it. All right. I had a friend one time. He was a pastor, and somebody was arguing with him about some theological point, and the person was just way off base. And they debated a little bit. And finally, my friend said, "Look, who's got the degrees on the wall?" In that end of the conversation.
Oh boy!
It was the only thing that was going to get through to him. He says, "Look, you're not talking to some guy on the street. I've been through 4 years of college, 3 years to get my master's degree in this, and several more years to get a doctorate of ministry. So, let's talk about who's spent the time in the classroom and who spent the time doing it. So sometimes we have to do that. So I would go back and tell myself, look, at some point you're going to have to get up and try, and it's okay to fail. My favorite quote from Teddy Roosevelt: "It's not the critic who counts, not the one who points out how the strong man stumbled or the doer of the deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man or woman who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who tries valiantly and errs and comes up short again and again, but whose place will never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." So you try, and if you're defeated at something, you can at least say, "I tried." Or the old phrase, "You go down swinging," the old baseball phrase. So The thing I've said to myself many times, and I probably tell myself, my younger self, this: shut up and put on your cowboy pants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier, and the fact that I didn't want to invest in myself. It probably came from that lack of confidence, that fear of failure. It's very safe to not submit your writing. It's very safe to not let anybody read it, because then nobody's going to tell you how bad you are. But it does take a little bit of you've got to be able to temper it, right? There's that over eager, let me show you what I have so you can sing my praises, and sharing too early. And then there's that fear that means that keeps you from ever sharing. You've got to find that balance. You have to know when it is appropriate to share your work, or rather, maybe sharing is the wrong word. You have to know when it's appropriate to submit your work for publication. And if you're sharing it, I wouldn't even think of it as sharing so much as soliciting someone's professional opinion. If you have, your alpha readers, your beta readers, if that's how you have your writing life set up, not everybody has those. Not everybody needs them. But very few people see my work before it's done these days, if anybody.
Which is a good thing. You would never invite someone over for dinner and serve them uncooked food.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you have them read an uncooked manuscript?
Well, I just want them to praise my selection of steaks that are sitting there on the plate raw.
Yeah, well, and that's really the thing is, I need the attention now. I'm not trying to be cruel. I understand that. I'm needy too, probably more than I should be. But you have to finish the work first. Have something worth showing. Cook the meal, and then get an opinion. If somebody says, "Look, you need a little more salt. Maybe we need a little of this," I'd have preferred, some dark greens, like green beans or something. Okay, you learn from that. You could make the adjustment, but at least you served something edible. And there are a lot of writers who won't do that. What they serve is inedible.
And we know because we've tried it. And Pops, I don't know if you have experienced this either, but it is those who are most eager to have you look at their work that are usually the worst things to read. No, you really need to read it. It's really, really good. No, you're going to love this. Read this. I don't have the available time to read your stuff. Oh, but you want to. It's really good. Here, just take a few pages. I'll take a few pages. I probably won't read them.
You've probably heard the story. It would do this to agents. You go into the bathroom, an agent will go in and be a little indelicate, but sit on the toilet, and somebody will shove a manuscript under the stall. And one agent picked the manuscript and said, "How did you know?" and ripped out a couple of sheets and then sent the rest of it back out.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and it was really the point. I was one time followed all the way back to my room, where somebody was insisting that I read their stuff.
Oh, my.
And I was in the elevator and they were pushing it on me. "No, you really got to do this." And so finally I took it and I walked in my room and I threw it in the trash.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be forced to read something. So the desperation will kill your reputation in no time.
So take yourself seriously, develop that confidence, know when to solicit a critique, if that's, if you're in a writer's group or something like that. But if you're looking for publication, make sure it's cleaned up and ready to go, and don't force it on people. So, yeah, moving on. Moving on. I would tell myself to read more. Seriously. I was that kid, especially in high school. Yeah, I want to be a writer. Oh, you better start reading. No, I don't like reading. Well, you can't be a writer if you're not going to read. Yeah, I can. I'm going to be that guy. That thought was in my head because I was brilliant as a teenager. I don't want to brag, but I had all sorts of nonsensical beliefs like that. And it wasn't until I started reading that I started to go, oh, this is what you can do. Oh, this is what a novel can be. Oh, this is how you put together a good short story. Come to find out, I actually enjoy reading. Surprise, surprise. But I would definitely go back in time and tell myself to start reading more. Put away some of the other hobbies and pick up more books, trying to be better about that. That's what I would tell myself. And then it's funny for me to say that because I don't think of myself as poorly read, but I definitely have some room to grow. I could definitely do some more reading. And so that's something that I really try and prioritize now when I can.
Yeah, that's one of the great ironies of being a full-time writer is you're at the computer a lot and your eyes are tired and you know you need to read, but they're shot. You spend your day reading your own stuff and writing, and then, you know, the eyes are just gone. You have to look at television, which is at least some distance away, so you can focus at something at distance. So, yeah.
And when we say read, we don't necessarily mean read your own stuff. Well, I read 3 scenes of my latest chapter, and that's my reading for the day. I mean, read somebody other than you. That's the big thing. It doesn't even have to be in your genre. If you're writing fantasy, read some sci-fi. Read a Western. Read a romance. Well, maybe not a romance. I'm teasing all you romance writers. Relax. It's jokes. Read a YA book. You know, whatever.
Send your letters to.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody letters anyone anymore.
His email address is.
So find the things, poetry. You guys have heard me say this, read more poetry. I think learning poetry is going to make you a much better writer of fiction. And conversely, being a good writer of fiction will help you with poetry to a large extent too. So I'm off my soapbox now.
Aaron, when you say reading, do you also include audiobooks in that, or is it better to read the actual printed text so you can see the layout on the page?
Reading via Audible and reading actual text on page is a different experience. I know that sounds ridiculous, but one is auditory and one is visual. The words are. I know. I'm getting there. Just let me politician a little bit more.
Okay.
There are advantages and disadvantages to both. I would be leery of anybody who does only one and not the other. The astute person will, really maximize their time, maybe listen to some Audible in their commutes, but read a book at lunch or something like that. In so doing, the great thing about text on page is you can highlight, you can make notes, you can annotate, you can write in the margins. If you're freaking out about me suggesting you writing in books, just bring some Post-its, do it on Post-its, whatever the case is, so that you can go back and have that connection with that book, with that text, with that author. In Audible, you get to hear the words. Listening to The Bargain, which is my novel, was a very different experience than reading it. The guy who did it, and this is a shameless plug here, but the guy who read The Bargain, which is available on Audible, did a phenomenal job. He does voiceovers professionally for HBO boxing, things like that. Just an incredible job with it. And there were times where he would read something and I was like, did I write that? I don't even remember writing it. It just sounded different in his mouth than it did hearing my own voice as I was rereading it in the process of edits and the things of that nature. I've also heard people butcher Slaughterhouse-Five and completely miss the nuances and the comedy in it. It's a very dark and foreboding book, but it's also funny. I mean, there are plunger-shaped aliens, and you're sitting here wanting the Tralfamadorians were shaped like plumbers, friends. It's like, stop. Just.
Oh gosh. No.
Yeah. And so I've heard bad readings. I've heard good readings. You're really at the mercy of the narrator with that. But you still need to listen critically in the same way that you would read critically. And you can't really make notes on Audible. You just really can't. And so, however, listening to the auditory input, you get a sense of how words are put together, how they sound together, almost more of a poetic look at it, because poetry is very much an auditory art form as well as a visual art form. So that was my very political answer of a little bit of both, if you can.
Okay, nicely played.
Yes,
that's good. I sometimes listen to Audible books that I know I wouldn't read. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be on a trip, so I'll listen to this, and I'll often pick one that I wouldn't normally read to get some variety. But Audible, remember, storytelling is called storytelling because it used to be audible. Mm-hmm. It used to be spoken. So We are fine-tuned. And when I edit, I have my computer read to me.
Mhm.
Even when I grade papers,
Yeah.
I have the computer read it to me because I will hear things that my eye won't pick up. But I also follow along as it reads it to me, so I can, do a detailed thing in very short order. So, yeah, okay, me then?
It is you, and we're running. We
I
got
see
about
that.
14 minutes. So,
Well, we've already talked about this one a little bit, so I'll be quick on this one. I would tell myself, love the work. Forget about fame and fortune. Love the art of writing. Too many beginners love themselves more. Just a second here. You have the wrong two there. There we go. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot.
No.
I just made it worse. Okay. Too many beginners love themselves more than the art they serve. And you can see that with singers on some of these shows, that really they're doing more watching to see if people are watching them. But you'll find the best ones, they're lost in the performance. That's what they're doing. They give their performance. I think that's the way a writer ought to be. Forget about yourself. I would tell myself, say, Al, forget about yourself, but never forget about your reader.
Mhm.
And that's the difference. It's where the focus is. So the best way to love yourself is to love your work and your reader.
You should love writing even if nobody's going to read it. If you're only writing because you want someone to read it, if you're only writing it because you want somebody to say how good it is, there's going to be some people out there who don't have good things to say.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be ready for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And most people, here's the other thing. I don't want to, oh man, here comes my soapbox. Stop being defensive. Stop being defensive. And again, I'm talking to my younger self. Pops, I remember writing a story that I thought was amazing, and I let you read it. And you were kind to me because you're related by blood and you have to be. But I remember getting it back. I thought you had stabbed yourself. I thought you had just bled all over the page. I was looking for bandages to seal up the open wound because there was so much red ink on the story that you'd given it back to me. And I don't want to say I don't want to use the word offended. I think I was disappointed. I was embarrassed. For sure, I was embarrassed. But I remember that you handled it very graciously. You said, okay, there's some good stuff here. Let's talk about that. But there are some ways that you can improve too. So I thought you handled it very, very well, especially for a very delicately sold, teenager.
Well, and in that case, I wanted, because I knew you could be a writer. I wanted you to know that there was this stage you have to go through, that you don't show too early and you must rewrite. Because you haven't rewritten, then you haven't written. So, yeah, I remember hitting that kind of heavy. But if this will make you feel any better, I mentioned Jack Kavanaugh earlier. We had a race to see who could publish first. And I won because I published an article in a small magazine.
Nice.
And he congratulated me, and then I had him read it, and he edited it, and I wish it had never been published.
Oh.
Yeah, it came back. It was all marked up, and I thought, oh, man. I should have had him read this before I sent it in. Lesson learned. But that got me off the dime where I try to turn in the best that I could turn in.
So, and let me spin it this way. Because we see this, Pops, with new writers. Read this. They'll hound us, finally read it. Okay. Your opening page. Let's talk about this first paragraph. Oh, well, what I was trying to do. Stop. Yeah. I don't care what you were trying to do. Here's what you did. Well, no, I did that because stop. I don't care why you did it. You did it. You shouldn't be doing it. Well, no, because later. I don't care about later. I care about right now. Stop defending it. It's especially when it's indefensible. Now, I'm not trying to poke fun at people, but this goes back to the conversation I think that you said Jack Kavanaugh was having with who's got the degrees on the wall, who's got the books.
Well, that wasn't Kavanaugh that said that. That was someone else. But
that was someone else. Okay, but who's got the books on the shelf? And very seldom are you going to say, oh, this is why I did it, and have me go, oh, well, then this is a wonderful work of art. I must have completely misunderstood. I mean, at some point.
I had one lady, she kept saying, well, what I meant was, then I finally had to say, well, then why didn't you write that? If that's what you meant, why isn't it on the page?
Now, That being said, those of you who attend writers' conferences, don't be afraid to talk to writers, especially during one-on-ones, because we understand that you're bringing us a work that's not publishable at that point. If you come to a writer and say, I'm looking for help, okay, great. We're going to sit there and we're going to help you. But come with a humble attitude. The difference, and Pops, you can either agree with me or disagree with me here. I would say the difference between a writer who's going to end up published and a writer who's not going to end up published is one who's going to defend poor quality work. If you come and you want to make excuses and say what I was trying to do, and you do not listen to the feedback of a professional, you are not interested in being published. If, however, you approach it with a humble attitude and you say, oh, I see what I've done there. Okay, so that is something I can work on. Do you have any advice on how I can develop that? Do you have any writing prompts? Do you have any tips or tricks? That's somebody who wants to learn. That's somebody who wants to improve. I'm going to throw my football team under the bus here. I put them in a particular coverage. They don't do their coverage. Where are you supposed to be? Over there. Then why were you over here? Well, you see what happened, coach. No, stop. My point is you're supposed to be over there. I told you to be over there. Stay over there. Well, what I wanted to, no, stop. This is how that was a touchdown. That guy beat you 6 points, touchdown. That's your fault. Don't tell me what you were trying to do. Do what I told you to do. The best players are going to be the ones who say, oh, you know what, coach, I got confused. I won't do it again. Okay. Oh, coach, what should I do in this situation? I was confused when somebody who, instead of trying to make excuses, you're going to own the mistake and then try and develop it. I've taken way too much time on this. But that's okay, because my next one we've already covered, which is prioritize your writing. Giving up some of the hobbies that you have, maybe not giving them up, but cutting back on them. And really being able to say no to your friends from time to time to make sure that your writing is getting done. I'm not saying give up all your hobbies. I'm not saying cut yourself off from family and friends. I'm saying take 5 minutes from each of your hobbies and put it together until you have an hour to write. People say, I don't have enough time to write. Nobody does. You have to make the time. Mm-hmm. I'm preaching to myself now because I haven't written in a few days because of job. But I'm actively working to find the time, or rather to make the time so I can get back into it. So prioritize your writing. I would tell myself that. And I'm going to do my last one real quick, Pop, because yours is better than mine. My last one would be, don't be too hard on yourself. I go back to that experience where you sat down and lovingly corrected me without crushing all my dreams and built me back up. It's very easy for me to go, oh, I've got something great. I think it's great. And for you to go, yeah, you know what? Not so great. And then it's immediately, I suck. I'm never going to be any good. I should give up. Writers tend to hear that voice very often. We have to learn to tell that voice to shut up, that we may not be perfect right now, but we are getting better. And that's just going to have to be good enough. So give yourself a little bit of a break. So you got one more, Pops? Oh, you got two more.
Yeah.
You got two more. All right.
Yeah. So I would tell myself this: a whining writer is seldom a winning writer. So, you've already hit on this some. Stop whining if you want to be a winning writer. Now, there are some, but for the most part, we shouldn't be whining about the work. It is work. It's wonderful torture. It's some of the best torture you'll ever experience. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it doesn't go the same every day. Some days, I am absolutely brilliant. Other days, I don't even know why I got out of bed. It just doesn't work. That's just the way it is. So yes, it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. Otherwise, everybody would be writing. So when things get tough, you lean into it. You keep going. And that's usually the difference between a published writer and a non-published writer is a non-published writer will hit a rough spot and either quit or try to find an easy way around. A published writer just leans into it, keeps going, can always come back and rewrite a portion, just keep going. So I think I would remind myself that new writers sometimes remind me of a mountain climber scaling Everest and complaining, hey, nobody told me this would be difficult. You look at it, it's a big mountain. It's the world's tallest mountain, 29,029 feet. Of course it's going to be difficult. People die on it every year. So sometimes I encounter somebody who's writing and goes, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. Yeah, well, it's supposed to be hard. Because you are creating art, which leads to my last one. Writing is an art and a craft. Art moves the soul, craft impresses the mind. So a great idea is for a wonderful painting doesn't mean the painting will be easy. It will take time. For my architecture days, come up with wonderful ideas, but to actually prepare the working drawings that the thing is going to be built from, that took time. That was hard. And there was a lot of back and forth, but that was just the way it was. So there are things to learn. And I've been at this for a very long time now, 25 years or something like that. So I had a lot to learn. And now after 25 years, I'm still learning. And frankly, that's the wonderful thing about writing.
You got to love it. You got to love learning. I love how you say that. It's an art and a craft. Very well said. I'm going to put that in the show notes. I am going to attribute it to me, though. I hope you don't mind. I will plagiarize that because it's so nice.
Because nobody can rewind the video and find out the truth.
Oh, no, this video is not going up. This message will self-destruct in 30 seconds. So those are our notes. Molly, since you're here, do we have any questions from the chat room?
Yes, we have a little bit of conversation. At the beginning of it, Tess said one of the things that she wished she knew before she started is that rewriting is hard, and keep the ego out of the way so you can delete the beautiful purple prose and dead ends is even harder.
Yeah, purple prose. I tend to think purple prose is hard to cut at first, but then once you kind of get a taste for it, you're like, oh yeah, let's cut that purple prose. Let's really streamline that.
And tell everybody what purple prose is.
Oh, it's melodrama. Tears fell like rain down her face and blah blah blah. It's when you're going over the top, going over the top, especially with emotion, and when it's really not hitting, that would be melodrama or purple prose.
Right.
So. Well, there you go. Lindsay wants to know if you have any poetry suggestions.
For poets to read,
yes.
One of my favorites is Marianne Moore. Absolutely love Marianne Moore. She's not super well known. Like she's a famous poet, but like she's not like an Elizabeth Bishop or a Sylvia Plath or a Robert Frost. But I think she's just as good as them, if not better. Now, on that note, Sylvia Plath, Robert Frost, Emily Bishop, they're all really great too. I would look into them. Adrienne Rich, I love. She has a few poems that you may want to skip, but otherwise, she's really, really phenomenal. She's got a lot of Adrienne Alone, I think, is no. I can't remember the name of it. Anyhow, Adrienne Alone is the name of a song I wrote based on a poem that Adrienne Rich wrote, and so I'm getting confused now. Anyhow, Amy Nez, N-E-Z, A-I-M-E-E-N-E-Z, is a contemporary poet that I absolutely love. And then Xochitl Bermejo is someone I went to school with who is phenomenal. Her name is Xothil. I gotta look it up now.
Aren't you glad you started down that path?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I didn't promote her. Xochitl. So it's Xochitl Julissa, Julisa Bermejo, Bermejo. I'm just gonna put her address in the chat room and let you guys click through. There it is, and I will hopefully put that in the show notes as well if I remember. But I went to school with her. I went to school with Rachel Kahn too. Kahn, K-A-N-N. She does a lot of spoken word stuff. She teaches at UCLA. Some really quality stuff there. So yeah. Any other questions?
No, that was it. A lot of good conversation. People going back and forth. When am I going out to South Carolina? Hopefully by the end of October. So that's it.
All right.
All we have.
Oh my goodness, and it's 6:30 exactly. It's almost like we planned that.
Wow.
Could not have gone.
See what happens when I'm around.
You make things go a lot easier. Thank you. Everyone, round of applause for Molly. Yay.
Yay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, next week we're going to continue with our 10 things, or not next week, next podcast in 2 weeks. We will continue our 10 things theme, and we're going to be looking at 10 mistakes I've made in my writing career. Pops is going to be doing that one solo because I haven't made any mistakes in my writing. So
I'll join you, Pops. I can probably cover them all.
That's when we'll probably go to 15 or 20, but we're going to call it 10 because, search engine stuff.
Time.
So, yeah. All right. Well, we thank you all for listening. If you're looking for us throughout the week, you can find Pops at altongansky.com. You can find Molly at frankly-mydearmojo.com. And you can find me at aarongansky.com. So until next time, thanks so much for listening and good writing.